You think loyalty means something, until the day it doesn't. You give a company a decade of quiet dedication, late nights, skipped lunches, numbers double-checked so no one else has to. Then one morning your boss looks you in the eye like you're just another expense. And that's the moment something breaks. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. I arrived early. My name's Mark Delaney, 42 years old, born in Ohio, raised on black coffee, hard work, and the belief that if you kept your head down and delivered, good things would follow. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I was solid. I'd spent 11 years in risk analysis, slow work, precise work. I tracked exposure, flagged outliers, ran models nobody else wanted to touch. You get good at seeing the small things, discrepancies, missed decimal points, and over time, people. You start to notice who's bluffing and who's holding the real numbers. It's a quiet kind of power, the kind no one pays attention to until you stop using it to help them. The morning started like any other. I was at my desk by 8:12. I remember the time exactly because I'd just logged into our system when I saw the calendar alert. Meeting with Russell, 8:30 a.m. No context, no prior heads up, just a block on my schedule that hadn't been there the night before. Russell Thorn, my direct manager for 3 years. He liked titles. He liked having the corner office, liked to talk about strategy even though he barely read past bullet points. I'd cleaned up more of his errors than I'd ever admit. If I was a ghost in the system, he was the figurehead, a mouthpiece for higher-ups who needed someone to point at during town halls. I walked in to find him already seated, scrolling on his phone with one hand, sipping a canned, sparkling water with the other. No smile, no, "Hey Mark, how's it going?" Just, "Close the door." He didn't ask me to sit. He didn't even pause before saying it. "We're letting you go." Just like that. No warning. No performance review. No discussion. I stood there, blinking. "Letting me go? Why?" "Restructuring," he said, flipping a folder toward me. "Position's no longer critical. HR will take you through the next steps." He didn't meet my eyes. Probably couldn't. I looked down at the paperwork. Separation agreement, 2-week severance, NDA, boilerplate language. I didn't need to read it. I knew it. I had helped write that same policy. Twice. I knew every clause before his assistant had a chance to fill my name in. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. I nodded, closed the folder, and left with the same calm I'd walked in with. Because what Russell didn't know, what he never bothered to notice, was that while he smiled in boardrooms and stapled his name to every win, I'd quietly been watching, documenting, backing up emails, tracking inconsistencies, noticing patterns. And the cracks in his carefully polished story had been growing for months. I didn't go home right away. HR gave me the usual speech, avoided eye contact, and handed over a generic exit checklist like they were reading from a script. I signed what I had to, nothing binding yet, and walked out with my box of desk stuff. Framed photo of my sister's kids, a stress ball shaped like a brain, a broken mug I'd been meaning to toss. It was surreal, like watching someone else's movie. But underneath that numbness, something colder settled in. Not anger, not grief, something heavier. Purpose. I drove to the library. Not because I needed books, but because I needed Wi-Fi and quiet. Sat down, opened my laptop, and got to work. I'd been documenting things for months. Not because I expected this day. Honestly, I thought I'd be overlooked like always, but because the numbers stopped adding up last fall. I flagged an internal discrepancy in fourth quarter expenses. Russell brushed it off. Said it was vendor billing. But when it happened again, then again, I started saving copies. Misallocated funds, overstated project returns. expense reports with duplicate entries that somehow got approved. A trip that was supposedly client-facing billed during a weekend in Palm Springs, right when his social media showed a golf course. It wasn't fraud. Not yet. But it was messy. And if someone followed the trail carefully enough, it would raise questions no board member would ignore. I had never planned to be the guy who exposed anyone. I believed in quiet work, not headlines. But the man who just fired me without cause, who smiled while doing it like he'd already cleared my badge code, had just made this personal. And if Russell wanted to play this game by the book, well, I helped write the book. I knew where the bodies were buried because I'd buried most of them. I just hadn't thought I'd ever need to dig them up. First, I went through emails, not the ones on the work server. I'd exported what I needed to a secure drive months ago. I'd seen too many restructures, too many quiet firings. My instincts told me to keep copies, especially when my team's budget kept shrinking, and Russell's client dinners kept getting longer and more expensive. I had spreadsheets, emails, travel logs, and 3 vendor invoices that had never been approved by procurement but still got paid. I also had a PDF of a quarterly report where Russell had inflated team performance metrics using data from before the measurement period even started. Second, I drafted a clean professional summary. Not dramatic, just facts. I wrote it like a compliance audit because that's what would get traction. I addressed it to the Internal Ethics Committee and BCC'd the Chief Legal Officer. Subject line: Irregular reporting and expense concerns. Request for review. No accusations. No threats. Just an outline of concerns with source files neatly organized in a Google Drive folder, all time-stamped, all backed up in 2 places. Then I hit send. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone. I just closed the laptop and walked out of the library into the cold March wind with my collar turned up and my heart beating steady. Because I knew the game wasn't over. It was just getting good. By the next morning, I knew something had shifted. It started with a call I wasn't expecting, from Jenna, someone I used to supervise before she transferred under Russell's wing last year. We hadn't talked much since the shift. Not because we didn't get along, but because, under Russell, silence was safer. "Mark," she said, low, careful. "Something's happening. HR's in early, Russell's office door is shut. No meetings, no one saying anything." I thanked her and kept it short. I didn't need details. I'd seen enough internal storms to know the signs. The whispering outside closed doors, the calendar suddenly wiped clean, the legal team walking around like shadows. By noon, I got a ping on LinkedIn from Ravi, a friend in finance. All it said was, "Nice timing," followed by a winking emoji. I didn't ask for more. If people were figuring it out that fast, then the report had landed. And it wasn't just the report, it was what it triggered. See, when a company gets a tip-off like the one I sent, organized, backed with receipts, and aimed at the right desks, they don't ignore it. Not because they care about the ethics of it, they usually don't, but because they can't afford the risk of ignoring it. What I'd put together wasn't just a complaint, it was a liability alert. If legal didn't act fast, they'd be the next in line for scrutiny. So they did what they always do in these situations. They launched a confidential internal review. That phrase sounds so calm, so corporate. What it really means is everyone's being watched. Emails are being scanned, expense reports are being pulled from the archive. And the person at the center of it all, the one who signed off on every shady receipt, is suddenly under a microscope with the heat cranked all the way up. Russell must have thought he was untouchable. He always acted like upper management was just a phone call away. And maybe that was true when things were quiet. But nobody wants to defend the guy who cost them more than he brought in. And once the documents were out, it became clear that Russell wasn't just sloppy. He was dangerous. He'd gotten lazy with the numbers, confident no one was watching. His arrogance had become expensive. And in corporate America, expensive is the only sin that actually gets punished. I don't know exactly what meeting happened or who said what behind those closed doors, but by 3:40 p.m., I got a text from Jenna again. 2 words, he's gone, no ceremony, no goodbye email. Just gone. By 4:15, his name disappeared from the company directory. By 5, his email bounced back with an inactive user message. I sat on my couch in sweatpants, watching it unfold in real time on my phone. Quiet. Satisfied. No part of me wanted revenge in the way people imagine it. No flames, no shouting. Just truth. Verified and undeniable. The system had worked. Not because it cared about justice, but because it cared about risk. And suddenly I wasn't the risk anymore. He was. I didn't celebrate. Not in the way you'd expect. There was no drink raised in triumph, no grin in the mirror, no victory lap. I just sat there on my worn-out couch, watching the daylight slip out through the blinds and thinking about how fast everything had changed. Then again, how slowly it all had built up. 11 years of quiet, precise work. 3 years of being slowly pushed to the edge. 1 bad meeting. And then, snap. But underneath it all, there was something heavier than relief. The question of what came next. A few people reached out. Cautiously at first. Ravi sent a second message, more direct this time. Man, I don't know what you did, but legal's been all over ops. Russell's name is radioactive now. Heard they're pulling contracts he approved going back 2 years. Jenna sent a follow-up too, this one with a tone I didn't expect. Are you okay? And yeah, I was. But explaining that kind of okay takes more than a text, because this wasn't joy, it was something more like completion. But there was still fallout. The ethics review opened up more than they expected, apparently. I hadn't even touched the shady consulting firm Russell pushed through last summer. Just assumed it was petty graft, not my fight. But someone else must have flagged it after my report. By Friday, 2 of his closest project leads were reassigned, one on extended leave. Word was, legal had requested a third-party audit of the West Coast billing office, where Russell had spent an oddly large amount of time last year. Meanwhile, I started getting calls from recruiters. That surprised me more than anything. Apparently, someone in the legal team quietly vouched for me. Said I'd demonstrated exceptional integrity under pressure. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. I had an idea. A week later, I met with someone from the executive team. Quietly, over coffee in a neutral cafe downtown. He was polite, careful with his words, said the company regretted how things were handled and that the situation evolved rapidly. Said my contributions had always been valued, that there'd been a breakdown in oversight, and that they'd like to talk about the possibility of reintegration. Reintegration. It sounded like something out of a spy novel. I smiled and stirred my coffee, then asked him one question. Would I report to someone who reads my emails without understanding what they mean? He didn't answer. I let him buy the coffee anyway. I wasn't planning on going back. Not to that office. Not to those glass walls. I'd spent too many years keeping things running while someone else reaped the credit and took longer lunches. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. And I'd finally realized something. You don't earn respect by staying quiet while people like Russell climb over you. You earn it by knowing when to speak, how to document, and where to aim. I spent the next few weeks relearning how to be still. That probably sounds strange, but after years of working in a system that demands constant motion, chasing deadlines, answering emails at 10 p.m., smoothing over the mistakes of men with better titles, stillness feels foreign. I'd wake up at 7 out of habit, sit at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling in my hands, and feel the tension in my body, like I was forgetting something. But there were no emails, no calls, no fires to put out. The silence felt dangerous at first. Then, freeing. I started walking more, reading, went back to the gym I'd neglected. Sometimes I sat in the park and just watched people rush past, all dressed for offices, coffee in one hand, stress in the other. It was like seeing my old life from the outside. And with every passing day, I stopped missing it. I stopped missing him. Russell, his shallow praise, his office politics, his polished shoes always stepping over someone else's work. He was gone. Not just from the org chart, but from my headspace. And that, somehow, felt better than watching him get fired. There's a myth in America that loyalty will be rewarded. That if you just work hard, keep your head down, and do your part, you'll be seen, promoted, protected. But that's not how it works in the real world. In the real world, people like Russell rise, not because they're good, but because they're good at being seen. I wasn't, and that used to bother me. But now I'm glad I wasn't one of them, because when they fall fast, and no one catches them. Word spread, slowly but surely, about what happened. I never talked about it publicly, didn't post a cryptic status, didn't hint at it in job interviews. I didn't need to. The people who mattered knew. A few even reached out and thanked me. Quiet messages, short calls. "You didn't just save your own skin," one said. "You protected all of us from where that ship was headed." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed the praise, but because, for once, someone saw what I did. Noticed. That kind of recognition lands different when you've spent a career behind the curtain. Eventually, I accepted a new offer, a smaller firm, flatter structure. No glass offices, no buzzwords. The hiring manager asked me in the final interview, "Why did you leave your last job?" I paused, then said, "Because I stood up for what was right, quietly." He nodded. Didn't ask for details. Just moved on. I liked that. The new job isn't perfect, no job is. But I'm respected here, my input matters, and best of all, I sleep. Really sleep. Number 3 a.m. alerts. No gnawing feeling that someone else is screwing up, and I'll be the one fixing it at sunrise. Just honest work, done well, with people who value it. And sometimes, when I think back to that morning in Russell's office, how calm I felt, how sure, I realize something important. Getting fired might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes I still think about that moment. The split second when Russell slid that folder across the desk, thinking he'd won, thinking he was in control. That smug half-smile he gave me, like he was doing me a favor by being professional about it. He had no idea what was coming. And that's the thing about people like him. They're always so sure the system works for them, never realizing the system only protects them as long as they're useful. He thought he had power, but he had paperwork. I had something else. Memory. Documentation. Quiet, patient truth. And I wasn't out for blood. I didn't need to see him humiliated or dragged through the mud. I just needed the truth to land where it had to. And it did. Because even in a world that worships spin, truth, when it's well-prepared, well-documented, and delivered to the right inbox, still has weight, especially when money's involved. I ran into one of the VPs months later at a conference. We chatted in passing. He asked where I'd landed, nodded approvingly. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, that whole thing, what you did, it reminded the board we still need people who pay attention." That stuck with me, because that's all I'd ever tried to be. Someone who paid attention. Not to get ahead, just to keep things from breaking. I don't tell this story often, Not because I'm ashamed, but because people always expect a louder ending. They want fireworks, revenge, a comeback with a title and a corner office. That's not what happened. I didn't win the game. I just stopped playing theirs. What I found instead was something I'd been missing for years. Dignity. The quiet kind. The kind you build by standing for what matters, even when nobody's watching. Especially when nobody's watching. If you've ever been passed over, cut loose, or made to feel small by someone who couldn't do a tenth of what you do, this story is for you. If you've ever sat in silence while someone like Russell smiled over your work, this is your reminder. You're not invisible. You're just inconvenient to the people who need shadows to shine. Let them play their games. Just make sure you keep the receipts. Because when the time comes, truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs one steady hand to turn the light on. And when that light hits the right face, the silence is louder than any applause.